All right, welcome everyone to Practice Better's Better Business Conversation series. My name is Brittany Andresen. I'm a business success coach with Practice Better, and today I am joined by our amazing guest expert, Lisa Fraley. Lisa is going to be talking to us all about legal basics for health coaches and holistic practitioners. So welcome, Lisa. We are so excited to learn from you today.
Thank you so much for having me, Brittany. I really appreciate you and Natalie inviting me, and I'm excited to share this information with everyone. So thank you.
Awesome. So for those of you who don't know Lisa, Lisa is an attorney. She's a legal coach, speaker. She's a #1 best-selling author and the host of the Legally Enlightened podcast. So Lisa blends her legal experience as a former healthcare attorney in a large corporate firm with the care of being a health coach. She has helped thousands of practitioners protect their businesses and brands with contracts, disclaimers, trademarks, and more. Lisa's mission is all about helping small businesses understand that the law can be accessible and empowering. So on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa and let her take it away and share with us legal basics for health coaches and holistic practitioners. So Lisa, you can take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Brittany. Well, I'm really happy to be talking about this topic today because I know that the legal parts of the business are areas where a lot of people have a ton of questions. And that's why Natalie thought it might be a good idea to have this session so that we can give you some information to help make the law a little less scary, a little less overwhelming, and so that you can know what to do when you're using Practice Better and how to use your legal documents in the system. So what I always love starting out with is just letting people know that I sort of have a different way of looking at the law. I look at the law from two perspectives, hence the "and" on my wall. First, the law is practical in all the ways that we think about, right? Like we know it covers your buns and it limits your liability and it keeps you safe and it helps you feel prepared if something were to go wrong. And it really does help you plan how to protect your business and help you on the back end if something does go wrong and you need to rectify it. So that's a practical side, but there's also an energetic side. And this is the part that was delivered to me through a divine download one day when I was just typing at my computer, where I sort of realized that the law is energetic also. And what I mean by that, like I always say, hashtag the law is spiritual too. But what I mean by that is that when you take legal steps in your business, it actually helps show you the way to shift in your business. You show up in a different way because when you have legal documents in place, you usually feel safer, more secure, more confident, more empowered, more grounded, knowing that you have a strong legal foundation as your base. I also like to say that you kind of sit taller, you stand taller when you know that you have legal documents that have your back. So that's the energetic space, is that you as a health coach or holistic practitioner or licensed practitioner, you show up differently in your business. And most people don't think of the law that way at all. So keeping that in mind as we go through what we're going to talk about today, the other piece is that I align legal steps with the chakras, the 7 main energy centers of the body. And this is also not a normal way to look at the law, but the reason why I share that is because the energetic piece we just talked about, and also it's a way to kind of help you know what steps to take and when to take them and how they actually help you. So when we go through the legal basics here, I want to talk about, in particular, 3 of the chakras, 3 of the steps that you'll want to take as you grow in your business. Now, what we're talking about may not apply to everyone. It may not be exactly what you need at this time, but it's helpful information for you to have to just give you some information and education. So when the time is right for you to take legal steps, you know what you need. So with that all said, please know that this information is designed to be educational, informational, and just to give you some help in knowing what's coming and to know what legal steps might be right for you. But you always want to talk to an attorney who understands what you do and make sure that you're taking the right steps for you. The one other thing I'll say before we dive in is I know there are people listening from all over the world. And so this conversation is based upon the legal documents that health coaches and holistic entrepreneurs need. So there will be some variations slightly for whatever country or perhaps state or province that you're based in. But in general, this information should be helpful to you because if you're running one-on-one client programs or if you're running group programs, this will apply to you, even if some parts of documents need to be tweaked a bit. So with that, let's dive in. So we've already talked about why the law is protecting you in a practical way and in an energetic way. But the first place I always like to start is talking about a waiver. Okay, now I know Practice Better gives you a waiver to get started, which is a wonderful first place to start because waivers can be really helpful if you are doing these things. First, if you're having a free discovery call and you're getting on the phone with a client and you're going to start coaching them or you're going to start helping them with their nutrition needs or you're going to start helping them with whatever is going on with them, you want to make sure that you're not going to be held liable for what it is that you're saying, even in that discovery call, right? So waivers can be really good to have someone sign. You don't have to legally, but it can be good protection for you to have someone sign a waiver as you're going into a discovery call, as you're starting to have an initial conversation with them, where they haven't really signed up for your program yet. What is a waiver exactly? Well, what a waiver is that it's usually waiving liability, which means that it's saying, hey, I'm here to share information with you, but I'm not liable if anything were to happen if you use this information. Because the idea is that you're waiving your liability, you're disclaiming your liability, and letting people know that you're going to be sharing information, but really the onus is on them to determine what they do with the information, how they apply the information. And so you're waiving liability, but waivers usually only support you around liability. It's a really good thing to have if you're just starting off, and also if you're doing a one-on-one paid consultation, perhaps at the very, very beginning, or a discovery call. But waivers are great, and they also often need to be replaced as you go along by a client agreement. So let's talk about client agreements. Now, a client agreement is a legal document that you sign and the client signs that basically tells them what's going to be included in your one-on-one program with them. So let's say you're a coach and you have a 4-month program, a health coach, and you want to take people through, for example, this is just an example, 2 calls a month by Zoom, and then you want to give them handouts and you want to give them recipes, and maybe you're going to help them do a kitchen pantry clean out virtually or something like that. And that's all included in your program. The client agreement is what you're going to use for that one-on-one coaching when you're talking about your program, so that it's very clear what your responsibility will be and what their responsibility will be when they're signing up for your program. Client agreements are gifts to your clients, I like to say, because they create clarity. And why is clarity important? Clarity is important because the more clear you can be upfront about your client policies, the more you're going to prevent confusion, frustration, headaches, missed communication later, missed payments later, because you have all of your policies laid out in this document. So the client agreement will have some waiver or disclaimer language in it addressing your liability, but it goes far beyond that. So what needs to be in a client agreement? I get asked this all the time by so many health coaches and entrepreneurs I work with. They're wondering, like, well, I kind of have this client agreement I got along the way, or I kind of have this legal document, but I'm not really sure if it has everything I need in it. Well, let's talk about the main areas that should be in a client agreement. And by the way, there's a lot. Legal documents should have heft, right? A lot of people say, Lisa, can I just use like a 2-page client agreement? And I'm like, generally speaking, that's not usually long enough to say everything that you need to say. So in order to protect yourself. So let's start with the 5 key sections. Even though there's more than this, there's 5 key sections, okay? First, a client agreement should have the program description. So as I mentioned a minute ago, remember how you're going to have your client program with your Zoom calls and your handouts and your recipes and your kitchen cleanup or whatever it is that you're doing. You want to spell all that out very specifically in your client agreement so that the client knows exactly what they're going to receive from you, and so that you know whether you've given them all the things that you said that you would give them. Because part of it is they need to be clear about what they're expecting, and you need to be clear about what you're giving. So you want to spell that out in detail, what it is that they're going to receive. Detail is helpful in contracts. especially around program description, how long the program is, how many calls they're receiving, how many types of handouts, or as much as you can specify that. Sometimes it's harder with handouts, but just letting people know that you're going to provide them with resources and tools and maybe a special kitchen cleanup or something like that. So it's all spelled out in the contract. That's the first section, the program description. Section number 2 is one that I include in my DIY client agreement. Not every lawyer includes it though, but I think it's important. And it's the expectations section is number 2, expectations. Why include expectations in a client agreement? Well, the reason is because when you set yourself up from the start, being very clear about what it is the client can expect from you, you also can be very clear about what you expect from the client. And these are things that can sometimes cause distress in a relationship. So for example, you can ask that your client show up on time. You can ask that your client show up on time without distractions, so they're not checking their phone or looking at email or whatever. You can say that you want your client to maybe, some people like to have them do assignments between calls, or maybe you want them to keep a food journal, or maybe you want them to bring a list of questions or do some homework. It's totally up to you what your expectations are, but you want to be clear with them that you want them to use their best effort, to participate fully in the program, to do the things that you're asking of them so that they can get the best results. And when you're clear about the expectations, they can bring their best self to your relationship, which is the whole goal, because the more that they fully show up, the better results they're probably going to experience. And likewise, you might want to say the same thing, that you're going to bring your full attention and show up with care and support and guide them and provide them with information and tools along the way so they know what to expect from you. So number 2 is expectations. The clearer, the better. Clarity is key. Number 3 is investment and pricing and refund policy. So this is the money piece. Not surprising, right? We want to make sure that in the client agreement, you're very, very clear about how much the program costs. How much is your one-on-one program? Can people pay it in full? Can they make installment payments over time? How much are the installment payments? Do they need to make a deposit first and then pay off the rest? How do you like to work? How do you like to receive your payments? So this is important. Sometimes people will say to me, well, Lisa, I don't really want to put the amount in the document because every time I change my price, I have to change it in the document, and that's sort of a pain, and I don't really like to do that, and it's just an annoyance. And I totally understand. I get that. Legal documents are not on anyone's list of things to do. Believe me, I know that for sure. And, because I'm all about the and here's the thing. You do want specificity in your contract because you do want to have that dollar amount in the contract so that you can hold the person to that. If there's no dollar amount stated, it's a lot harder for you to prove what they agreed to, because your sales page with the price on it might change, or you might have sent an email or something with the price. But the best thing to do is put it in the contract itself, even if you have to go in periodically and practice better and update your client agreement. It's still much, much better to be very specific about the payment. To that same end, you want to be very specific about your refund policy. So what kinds of refund policy can you have? Well, there's 3 main types of refund policies. First, you can say that you give no refunds at all. That's pretty simple and straightforward, that at any time during the program, receive a refund. You can also give a partial refund, which means that maybe you've gone along with them and halfway through they decide they want to stop, or it's getting difficult for them, or they're really struggling. You can say, hey, that's fine, but I'm going to keep payment for the first half of this program for the calls that I've already made for you and with you, and you can receive a refund for the calls we're not holding yet because we're canceling. That's called a partial refund. Or the third type is a full refund. And that's what we all think of as the 100% money back guarantee. Some people like to give a money back guarantee for a certain period of time, like 24 hours or 48 hours. Some people give a money back guarantee anytime during the program. It's completely up to you. There's no right or wrong way to decide what policy you want to have, but I want you to be super clear about it. And if you need help with your refund policy and knowing what should be in it, you can just go to lisafraley.com/refund-proof, and you'll be able to get a quick guide that will tell you what needs to be sure is in your refund policy. So that's the refund policy. So make sure it's in your client agreement. Okay, we've talked about the program description, the expectations, and the investment pricing and refund policy. The fourth thing that needs to be in your client agreement is the disclaimer. So a disclaimer is language that disclaims your liability, which means that you're saying, I'm not liable. I'm not liable for this, and you're responsible for that. So in our holistic world, we talk about things like, if you're not a medical doctor or a licensed practitioner, you want to say in your client agreement, I am not a medical doctor or a mental health professional or another type of licensed practitioner, like a registered dietitian or a physical therapist or an occupational therapist, or the list goes on. You want to make sure people know that you're not giving medical advice or psychological advice or nutrition advice or medical nutrition therapy if you're not an RD or licensed nutritionist. There's a lot that needs to go into this disclaimer section of your client agreement. I certainly know that in my DIY client agreements, I make that section pretty long because there's a lot that coaches and holistic practitioners need to disclaim that sometimes not all lawyers know because they don't necessarily work as closely with coaches and entrepreneurs. So if you're working with a lawyer to create a client agreement for you, make sure they understand what you do and make sure that you and they are clear on what needs to be disclaimed. That's a really, really important section. You're saying, I'm not liable, and client, you're personally responsible for your results. You're personally responsible for how you use the information I'm sharing with you, but I am not liable for that. That's the disclaimer section of the client agreement. Number 5, the next big section is limitation of liability. What the heck is that? Well, that basically says, you know, a minute ago, we just disclaimed our liability and said, I'm not liable as the coach for what you do with the information. Now we're saying, even if I am somehow liable, my liability is limited to only these things, so that you're making the liability be less through the contract. And fortunately, in the Western world, and perhaps the Eastern world, I'm just not as familiar with their contracts, we are allowed to privately contract and limit liability together. So that's a way for you to basically say, if something does go wrong, I'm only liable for this. I'm only liable to giving you the money back that you paid for the program and no other damages or no other money back, for example. Limitation of liability and release of claims are really important to mention in your document. Now, there's at least 10 other sections that need to be in there, including governing law and dispute resolution and things like assignment and a whole bunch more. So those are just the highlights. So if you're using a client agreement, go back and check and see if it has those 5 key sections. And if not, you might need to do an upgrade, because the whole goal of the client agreement is make sure you're protecting your income, you're being clear about the program, you're being clear about your expectations, and you're limiting and disclaiming your liability. That's a client agreement. I align the client agreement with the sacral chakra in the body. Why? Because this is the energy center from which all ideas are born, literally, like you're birthing your program into the world. It's the area that's your pelvic region. And I like to say all the good stuff lives there. It also aligns with things like abundance and boundaries and creating new programs. So that chakra is one that you can think of when you think of the client agreement, because you're creating loving boundaries and policies for your client in the document. So that's a client agreement for one-on-one clients. Now, the next document you might want to consider is if you're doing a group program. Okay, now we're moving on from one-on-one to groups. You've gone from one-to-one, you're expanding your messaging and your work to a group program. Now you're offering a group course, an online course. You're having people show up for Zoom calls maybe every Thursday at 5, and maybe there's a Facebook group, or maybe there's an online forum, or maybe you're providing modules and videos and audios they can watch, and then they can come to the Q&A calls. There are a whole bunch of different ways you can do a group program. But when you're working with groups, there are different things that you need to be disclaiming in addition to some of the things that are in the one-on-one agreement. So we have different legal documents for different purposes, right? I always say the law is like the human body. There's no one size fits all legal document. You can't just have one legal document for everything. It just doesn't work that way. Just like you can't have one food plan or one diet that works for everyone, because everyone is different. So in this case, if you're running a group program, no one-on-one, no one-on-one involved at all, then you're going to use a document that I call the terms of use. Terms of use. These are sales terms. These tell people what they can and can't do with the content in your program. And they also address things like pricing, online commerce, payment, refund policy, disclaimers, group behavior. These go into greater depth. This is a much longer document because unfortunately, it's the people in the group program who are more likely statistically to walk off with your content because they don't have as close of a connection with you. So there's strong intellectual property language in this document, and there's strong language saying, here's what you can do with my program, and here's what you can't. Like, for example, you can download and print off my group program content for yourself, but you can't take it and put it in your own program, or you can't take it and put it on your website, or you can't take it and write a book about it and sell it on Amazon. So you're getting really, really clear about when someone buys your group program or online course, what they can and can't do with it, as well as how expensive it is, what happens if they want a refund, what happens if they need to contact you, limitation of liability, disclaimers, dispute resolution. It's a very substantive document with lots and lots of sections, but I want to make sure that you have this because when you're having people purchase your group program, these are the sales terms that usually they check a box in Practice Better and agree to the terms. This is where they check the box and agree to the terms, and the terms of use are what you want to use for the group program. Really, really important. So we have one-on-one programs as the client agreement and group programs as the terms of use. Okay. Now, two last points. First, people will say, well, Lisa, what if I have a hybrid program? What if I have a program that has one-on-one and group? What do I do then? How does that work? So there is one other legal document. If you have a hybrid program where you have some group call or some one-on-one calls and some group calls, and that document I call the DIY Client Agreement for Small Groups and Masterminds. DIY Client Agreement for Small Groups and Masterminds. Now, this document is a contract that both of you sign, but it's designed to protect and keep confidential the information in the one-on-one call, along with a lot of the other terms we talked about earlier in the contract. And it has some terms that apply to group settings. Like, for example, if you're in a group call and someone's sharing something, you in the group setting, you can't be held responsible for keeping that confidential because they're sharing it voluntarily in the Facebook page, let's say. But you can tell them and assure them that you're going to keep confidential anything they tell you in that one-on-one call, which is a part of this hybrid program. So you have to have slightly different legal terms, which is why this is a different legal document. So we have client agreement for one-on-one, terms of use for group programs, and then for the hybrid of both, you have the DIY client agreement for small groups and mastermind. Okay, now the last point I'm going to make has to do with Hipaa, because this is a big question. Now that we've talked about the legal documents for most of people's sources of income, we're going to talk for a second about Hipaa. I get asked all the time, Lisa, if I'm a health coach or a holistic practitioner, do I have to follow Hipaa? This is a huge topic, so I'm just going to give you the highlight now. I do have a free podcast episode on the Legally Enlightened podcast, episode 80, which goes into greater depth about if Hipaa applies to you, because there will be some cases as a health coach where it does apply to you, but then there are other cases where it doesn't. Now, what I love about Practice Better is that it's already Hipaa compliant. That's fantastic. So if Hipaa ever does apply to you, this platform has your back, and that is fantastic. It's wonderful. One of the best features, I think, of Practice Better for holistic and practitioners and health coaches. But generally speaking, as a health coach working with your client, just doing your calls and entering your notes, your client notes into Practice Better, you as a health coach, not practicing medicine, not being a nutritionist or dietitian, but just a health coach. And I say that lovingly because I'm a health coach trained at IAN too. So I'm just a health coach too. You do not need to follow Hipaa. Health coaches, generally speaking, do not need to follow Hipaa. There are exceptions. If you work with doctors, if you work for doctors, if you're receiving medical records from doctors for your clients, there are some times you do. But in general, health coaches do not need to follow HIPAA. But what if you're a licensed professional? What if you are a doctor listening to this, or you are a therapist, or because HIPAA is available through this platform and it's already HIPAA compliant, you can use this platform too, or if you're a registered dietitian, of course. So if you are a registered dietitian, licensed practitioner, mental health practitioner, lots of different types of licensed practitioners, HIPAA does apply to you for your patients. You do need to follow HIPAA for your patients. So Practice Better has your back. That's the good news. The one other thing I'll say about that is that if you are a licensed practitioner and you are practicing medicine and using Practice Better as your electronic medical note-taking device, then you will be using a slightly different form. Instead of the client agreement for one-on-one clients that we talked about back here, you are going to use an informed consent form to treat your patient, consent to treat. I'm sure many of you know that because as a licensed practitioner, you learn that in medical school or in therapy school and just as you're going on as a licensed practitioner. But just know that you would use an informed consent form for your patients. And as health coaches over here, use a client agreement as a health coach because medicine is different from coaching. So with that, that just sums it up for you that we talked about the we talked about 4 main legal documents. One is the waiver, one is the client agreement, one is the terms of use for group programs and online courses. And we talked about the informed consent if you happen to be a physician. And we also talked about the client agreement for small groups and masterminds. And then we touched on HIPAA for a bit. So I hope that gives you just a nice overview of the legal documents that you will want to use as you go forward in your career. Again, you may not use all of these documents, but they're designed to make it easy for you to get the language that you need. And that's why I've created 45 legal templates to help people get documents that they need for their practice that at an inexpensive cost and that make it really easy to fill out, that are all written in plain English. So Brittany, thank you so much. I hope that information is helpful to everyone.
Yeah, that was fantastic. I love that you break it down to be really easy. And I really like the unique angle of tying legal, it's just so unique to see it brought back to chakras and think of it that way. It takes a lot of the fear out of it. We all think it's so daunting and so intimidating and something that we really don't want to touch because we're afraid of doing it wrong. But I really liked that comparison and just breaking it down. But the other thing that I really enjoyed about your talk is that you really laid out the fact that it's mutually beneficial. It's beneficial for you to protect yourself as a client, but also, we're all so mindful of the experience that we're providing for our clients. We want them to have great outcomes, and to set those expectations so plainly for them is just going to, benefit everybody. So it's not just about, going into this thinking worst case scenario, you have to protect yourself. It's also really about just paving the way for your client to have a great experience too. So I love that.
Thank you. And that is something I do uniquely. Most lawyers don't put expectations into the client agreements, but I think it's really important because with your one-on-one client, especially, you want them to excel as much as possible during your time with them. So thank you for noting that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think, to take out that gray area for the client, to let them know exactly what's required of them, it just helps eliminate any potential headaches. I come from a background with customer service and long kind of relationships with people where setting expectations, if I didn't do that, things always went awry. So that was like my hill to die on. Where should people go? So, you mentioned, if you're in Canada, if you're in the States, state can differ, provinces can differ. Where should people go to learn what they need to know for their specific location?
Sure. So it's going to depend on what you do specifically, what type of, if you have a medical practice, what type of medical practitioner you are, if you're a health coach or a holistic practitioner, what type of practitioner you are, what the services are that you're providing. So I offer a couple of things. First, if it resonates with you, we are always happy to have a free 20-minute legal chat with everyone to just learn more about you and try to point you in the right direction, whether that is a legal template that I offer or services that I offer, or to refer you to a different attorney who might be better suited for you. We do have legal templates that are a lot of people from other countries purchase because they have the language that they need for the health coaching part. And then they have a local attorney review it to see if there are any tweaks that need to be made to match the local jurisdiction. Because what I found was, Brittany, years ago, all these people were bringing me contracts written by lawyers, and they were very dry, and they were very legal, and they were very cold, and it didn't have the language in it that they needed for a health coach. And I thought, wait a minute, let's reverse engineer this. Let's create what they need and then take it to the local lawyer to find out if anything needs to be tweaked for the local law. So I'm happy to help you with a free legal chat if that's helpful. And you can book that at 𝗕𝗲𝘁𝗁𝗲𝗂𝗁/DIY. 𝗕𝗲𝘁𝗁𝗲𝗁/legal chat. And then also the DIY legal templates are 𝗕𝗲𝘁𝗁𝗲𝗁/DIY legal templates. Or if you wish to work with a local attorney, that's great. You can just go ahead and do that. I just really, really, really want you to work with a lawyer who understands the work that you do.
Yeah, I think it's so crucial to have your legal documents be written in a way that you truly understand them. I came from a career where I was dealing very often with contracts that were 20 pages long, something of that sort, for various companies, a very similar contract, but written in different ways. Some of the companies had it so that it was written in a way that I could understand it, my client could understand it, we could have a conversation and feel good. Other companies that I worked for, this contract was so heavy with legal jargon that it was like a different language. So I think, to have these DIYs done in a way that you feel confident that you can pass these over to a client and not feel like you don't know what you're actually sending over to them is huge. Is there any other place that you'd like to direct people about where they can connect with you and continue to learn from you?
Yeah, sure. LisaFraley.com, my website, which is LISAFRALEY.com. The reason I want to direct you there is because it also has a link to my free podcast, which I mentioned, the Hipaa podcast. You'll find the DIY legal templates. You'll find a link to the legal chat. There's free resources there. So that's the best place, is to just go to LisaFraley.com. Please reach out to us. Do not hesitate. Don't be afraid. Just please reach out. We're happy to always try to help you if we can, or we will make a determination to say you need to talk to a different attorney, but at least you're talking to someone from the very start who understands what you do, and who also understands practice better, I might add as well. So if that's helpful, if I can be of help, please feel free to reach out anytime.
That's fantastic and such a great resource for people. So thank you so much, Lisa, for joining us today. That was invaluable. I'm sure people are just scribbling a ton of notes as they listen to your session. So thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brittany, for having me. Thanks so much to you all. And thank you for the work you do at Practice Better. You make so many health coaches and holistic practitioners' lives so much easier and better. So thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Bye.